This is the Road to Life Plan, Video 3. Step 2. Realize we are poisoned by oil. We realize that the power of oil is also a poison to mankind, and that it causes us to become addicted to it, and that we have lost control of our lives, our environments, and of our dominion over all of life because of the power of the poison of oil and our addiction to it. Man's addiction to oil, including coal and nuclear, is causing him to sacrifice his future and the future of his children and all the children of the earth forever to be born. The only way mankind can stop this insanity is to end our use of oil and reverse the destruction. In other words, clean up the mess and don't add any more. The feeling in mankind that the poison of oil incites is the raw, instinctual feeling of power. I remember when I was young and feeling the power of the hot rods, the bored out engines with 4-barrel carburetors and glass packed mufflers that would race each other with burning rubber tires from stoplights when the cops weren't around. I remember feeling the thrill of acceleration when they laid me back in my seat so hard I couldn't even raise my head. And I remember the sense of personal power and freedom to do things I had never done before that I got from the internal combustion engine and the automobile. I knew that other people felt this power also. This same power went into airplanes and trains and ships and automobiles. When oil came on, money was enhanced, and the two powers working together caused the consumption of the earth to soar and enabled the creation of the Industrial Revolution. Joining oil with money was like pouring gasoline on a fire. The whole world flared up. Giant oil powered combine machines were made so that massive crops could be planted and harvested. Farms became huge and bank owned. Suddenly the oceans were harvested by fast oil powered ships. Railroads spread all over. Industry exploded, and alternating current electricity wired the entire country. Everything was changed. Nature was annihilated, and the well fed population of America exploded. Many families were having 6 or 12 children. The banking industry soared, and the military industrial complex grew to vast proportions, and mankind became obsessed with his love for the automobile. Because of the poison of money and the poison power of oil, mankind ignored the warnings of consequences and covered the lands with asphalt and concrete so we could drive. We've also covered the lands with houses and industry and gluttonous wastes. Terrible wastes like from radioactive nuclear power and nuclear arsenals, as well as other super intense chemical wastes. The power of oil has enabled man to destroy his own environment at an extremely rapid rate. Before oil, the destruction was much slower, but with the power of oil and its resultant use of the internal combustion engine, mankind has been able to increase his consumption of the earth by thousands fold without thought of the consequences. Man saw this destruction, as is written in many books, but the power of the poisons of money and oil are overwhelming. No one can stand against them. When humans are under the influence of a poison, then humans will act according to the symptoms of the poison. A person who gets rabies, if untreated, will eventually exhibit the symptoms of the poison. One of the symptoms of the poison of a drug is denial. Another symptom is the desire for more of the poison. Another symptom is to continue the insanity no matter how bad it gets. Though 99% of scientists agree that cigarettes are very harmful, the corporations that make money off the cigarettes employ 1 or 2 scientists to claim that cigarettes are not harmful. Though no viable means exists for the safe disposal of radioactive nuclear waste, nuclear power plants are built anyway. When military captains have ships loaded with the toxic wastes of war, and there is no plan for how to handle them, the depths of the oceans become the graves that haunt humanity for eternity. When humans are under the influence of a poison, they act according to the symptoms of that poison. A good conservation effort could reduce the amount of oil and coal burned by a dramatic amount. But that concept goes against the poison of money and the power of oil. Like money, oil obscures the truth and makes itself more important than even the earth to the spirit of man. Ocean acidification, overpopulation, climate change, homeless people, bumper to bumper traffic, rising food prices, all the insanity, the root cause has increased to two poisons working together on the human psyche. Money and oil have blinded and confused us and robbed us of our environments and of the health of our planet. All of these things are but symptoms of the disease, symptoms of the poisons of money and oil. The only way mankind can see the road to life is to end his use of money and oil. Step 3. Develop and deploy climate change action plans. This step will be developed by collective intelligence, possibly at radish.com. Refreezing the Arctic is the most important immediate need. The following is a list of some of the things that collective intelligence will answer. How to refreeze the Arctic. How to counteract global dimming. Develop an endless source of free, non-polluting energy for all. Remove carbon from the air. Remove carbon from the ocean. Shut down and decommission all nuclear power plants and dispose of the waste. Develop methods to grow food efficiently. How to restore dried out lands. How to ensure that all people are fed. Techniques for voluntary, temporary sterilization. How to distribute work. How to develop a government. How to educate people. Step 4. Establish an all-volunteer workforce. The elimination of money opens the doors for mankind to use our creative minds and make the radical changes we need. Establishment of an all-volunteer workforce is one of the changes, and it's a good one. Today, Americans work long, hard hours. When the average commute time of 45 minutes, many commutes are far longer and frequently delayed, is added to 8 hours of work and an hour of mandatory lunch, a typical American adult's life is consumed almost 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. During this time, the American is normally employed working for someone else, not necessarily doing what we want to do, or what we would do if we were free and had the time. If you have a child, you might add another hour for drop off and pick up at school or daycare. Then there are all the things one must do to go to work, maintain the car, get the haircut, buy the clothes, and buy food. At the end of the day, we collapse into our beds and dream of the weekend. We run this rat race in order to survive. Even though the costs of the stress on our lives and our environments are enormous, we run this rat race anyway because this is how we were raised to live. This is all we know. We try to be happy, but in reality it's difficult because everything seems so tense and violent as you see people flipping each other off on the freeways and laying on their horns at intersections. It seems like insanity, doesn't it? The truth is that life doesn't have to be this way. It can be much better. The 15-hour work week. Well over a decade ago, I began to imagine how mankind could live without money. This thought alone set me on the course of the road to life. It didn't take long for the vision to unfold, and has now progressed into this 12-step program I named the Road to Life. But when I first started, I had to think of how man could live without money, and it readily occurred to me that with all the automation and computer technology we have today, a smaller workforce should be able to supply all of our needs and wants on a large scale. After all, haven't we been told that computers and automation were supposed to decrease our work times and make life easier? I began envisioning a volunteer workforce for a shortened work week. I assumed that if the work week could be lowered significantly, plenty of people would volunteer. I then asked myself the question, how many hours could the standard American 40-hour work week be reduced if money were eliminated? This is a question that Google doesn't answer. No one seems to think of the concept of eliminating money. So I decided to do my own estimate of the potential reduction of the typical 40-hour work week caused by the end of money. But studies far more sophisticated than mine will need to be conducted to come up with real estimates. Even those estimates, however, would be dependent upon the assumptions of many variables. My estimates, therefore, had to make assumptions also. And to be honest, I often had to use my best gut based guess for the answer. So, in order to try for a little more accuracy, I did two estimates and approached the question of how many hours from two different directions. The first estimate rendered a 14-hour work week, and the second estimate rendered a 13.6-hour work week. Of course, in an all volunteer, no money system, there will need to be basic inventory keeping and supply and demand numbers so that factories will know how much to produce and shippers will know how much to ship. To account for this record keeping, I will round the work week up to 15 hours per week. This allows roughly 7% above the highest estimate for the efforts of inventory control and dissemination. These estimates are also based on the ideal of conservation, assuming that the energy forms we use now will not change. Step 7, however, talks about developing a free, non polluting, and unlimited energy source. If we can do this, and I think we can, our potential to rectify the damage we have done will increase even more. But that source has not been established yet, and therefore we cannot count on it. And even if we could count on it, we must still dramatically reduce our gluttonous consumption, our heavy footprint on the earth. The establishment of an all volunteer workforce will reduce mankind's footprint by at least 60% almost overnight. The first estimate: how much of the USA's standard 40-hour work week is spent dealing with money? If money is eliminated and all the money work is therefore removed from the 40-hour work week, how many hours would that reduce the work week to? Removal of the fire sector. The Washington Post says that 20% of the USA's GDP is accounted for by the finance, insurance, and real estate fire sector. If we assume that 20% of the GDP equals 20% of the businesses and or 20% of the 40-hour work week, a crude estimate reveals a potential shortening of the work week by 20% to 32 hours simply by removing the fire sector of business. With no money, there will be no need for finance, insurance, or real estate work. Investopedia defines the fire economy as a sector of the economy composed of finance, insurance, and real estate, hence the acronym FIRE. Businesses that make up the fire economy include banks and credit unions, credit card companies, insurance agencies, mortgage brokers, investment brokerages, real estate agencies, hedge funds, and more. The fire economy is a major contributor to the overall U.S. economy. Note that the fire sector does not include the accounting offices of the rest of the GDP businesses. If there is no money, then the accounting departments of businesses and governments will not be needed. Payrolls, timesheets, medical plans, Social Security, and retirement accounts will not need hours applied for that work. That portion can then be removed from the 40 hours. The fire economy also does not include labor hours attributed to finance. For example, it does not include the time for clerks at the grocery store or for a mechanic to fill out his labor hours for pay, or the time a city spends applying for a grant. It also does not include the legal profession, advertising, tax accounting, audits, purchasing of materials, and a host of many more money oriented work time allotments that wouldn't be needed if there was no money. I could not find statistics for how much of the workforce's time is spent dealing with money. But since the workforce represents 80% of the GDP and the fire sector represents 20% of the GDP, I felt it safe to assume that the workforce's time spent dealing with money in one form or another would be at least as much as the fire sector. I also thought about factories and other businesses, both big and small, that I've seen, and I did a mental guesstimate that the ratio of workers on the floor of the factories' businesses to associated office personnel was about 4 to 1 on average, or also 20%. Therefore, I removed an additional 20% to account for elimination of the money work of the workforce. Now the work week is down to 24 hours per week. All of these reductions are dependent upon the elimination of money. What are some of the other time costs that can be removed from the 40-hour work week? Elimination of waste. A large amount of the 40-hour work week is used making waste. Think of all the junk that is made that people don't need, but buy almost compulsively because it's the coolest thing in the store that they can easily afford. Then there are cheaply made products so that more products can be sold. These products are often inferior because the manufacturer is trying to cut every expense possible. You go to buy a new bicycle, for example, and you can only afford $200. It just so happens that there is a manufacturer that makes a cheap $200 bicycle for you. What you really want is the $2,000 bike, but you can't afford it. So you get the cheap bicycle, and soon it doesn't work anymore. You have purchased waste. Many products, such as cars, are designed with planned obsolescence so that it will have to be repaired or replaced after a certain time. This is waste. Additionally, most packaging is wasteful. The packaging you need is something to hold the product and to label what it is. But in the monetary system, the container is most often constructed for presentation and advertisement of the product, two things that are not needed. You go to the store to buy a tool, and what do you care about, the tool or the packaging that it comes in? If money did not exist, many of these companies that manufacture this waste would not be needed. Therefore, a portion of manufacturing support companies that produce things like inks and dyes for advertising can be considered as making waste for monetary purposes and can also be removed from the 40-hour work week. These are just a few examples. The reality is much greater. The removal of waste is a big deal. I will subtract what I feel is a conservative guess of 10% for the elimination of waste created by the use of money. This reduces the work hour week to 20 hours per week. Please feel free to place your own numbers in this estimate for how much time you think America spends dealing with money, and or provide me with your numbers/facts. I want to improve this estimate as much as possible. Standardization. When money does not exist, standardization can happen. Walk through a department store in your mind and recall the enormous selections of everything. How many types of clothes do we really need? How many types of deodorant, kitchen plates, keychains, and energy drinks do we really need? Standardization means a giant reduction in the amount of factories, warehouses, supporting businesses, and energy involved in the process of making all these unnecessary choices. Standardization means that greater quantities can be shipped with less energy. Nearly overnight, truck traffic on the highways could be reduced by well over 60% and probably more, my guess. I went into a large chain department store about 10 years ago and counted the different selections of toothpaste. There were literally 300 different choices, probably more now. Almost every toothpaste item sold was inside a plastic tube made of oil and also packaged inside a cardboard box made from trees. Imagine how much space all this takes up on a truck and how much more a truck could hold if the toothpaste was shipped out in pint-sized returnable containers. What if laundry detergent was shipped out in 250-gallon totes and you go to your storehouse with your refillable container? Imagine the space on a truck that 250 1-gallon plastic containers take up, as opposed to a single 250-gallon tote. Standardization will mean that the total traffic load on our nation's roads would be reduced so much that further road expansions will no longer be necessary. Also, road maintenance would be greatly reduced. Here in the USA, we already have so much clothes, gadgets, etc., that we don't use and often don't even know we have. Much of this, like clothes for example, can be used many years into the future. Standardization will reduce the number of choices, but who needs all these choices? The reduction of mankind's footprint on Earth is needed far more in order for mankind to survive. These vast amount of choices we have in America show the third world nations what a decadent and gluttonous society America has become. Standardization is the kind of change we need, but the only way that will happen is if we end our use of money. If we standardized and maintained the use of money, life would be more like socialism or communism, neither of which is the direction of the road to life. If the road to life has an ism for classification, then I would call it neighborhoodism, but that comes in the next step, step 5. Standardization is also a big deal. I will subtract 10% for standardization. This reduces the work hour week down to 16 hours per week. Consolidation. When money does not exist and products are standardized, business consolidation can happen. Instead of having 20 toothpaste factories, for example, maybe only 1 or 2 toothpaste factories would be needed. The best machinery and processes could be taken from the 20 and put into the 2, thereby providing the same product except with less choices and produced by the most efficient means. Then everyone who works for one of the excess hypothetical toothpaste factories can be considered as working the entire 40 hours for money, because without money, these extra factories will not be needed. I will subtract 5% to account for consolidation. This reduces the work hour week to 14 hours per week. The second estimate. I base the second estimate on a list from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics of 1,090 jobs in 2016 that were listed with the percentage of the workforce that each job contributed. All 1,090 jobs added up to 100% of the workforce. I equated that 100% to equal a full 40-hour work week. I then either removed or eliminated part of the percentages as I felt the percentage would be if money did not exist. I also wrote down my reasoning for the reduction of these percentages. The below table is a shortened version of the Bureau of Labor Statistics spreadsheet. The 1,090 jobs were categorized under the below listed occupations. Each percentage of each job under its occupation group were added together to make the sum as shown in the Bureau column on the table below. All the percentages of the management types of occupations, for example, add up to 6.1%. All the totals of percentages add up to 100%. And then I show the tables and my comments. And then at the bottom of it, I say, for the long version of the second estimate, please go to, and there's a link. The benefits. When money is eliminated, the work hour week can be reduced to 15 hours, according to my estimate. The hours will likely fluctuate, but generally they could be even less than 15. The elimination of money frees mankind from slavery. Finally, machines will do what they're supposed to do. Mankind will finally have time to spend with our children and our friends and families. Financial stress will end. Traffic stress will end. There will be no more worries about making mortgage or rent payments, or having enough money to purchase that sewing machine, or that lens for your camera, or pay far above the deductible to have your teeth fixed. Standardization and consolidation will provide everyone with quality goods instead of the junk that most people can afford. Waste will be eliminated. Empty factory buildings and parking lots can be bulldozed down and grass, flowers, bushes, and trees planted. People will have time to restore the earth. In a year or two, rivers will run clean again. Mankind's footprint on earth will be drastically reduced, and Mother Earth and all of creation will breathe a sigh of relief. If you no longer had to worry about paying your rent or school loan or taxes or for your food and clothing, and the 40-hour work week was reduced to 15 hours, would you volunteer to work? If you sacrificed the money part of your career to gain your freedom and you didn't have to worry about survival anymore, would you consider working 15 hours a week of fair trade? And if by volunteering to work, you would also be helping to save our planet and life for our children and grandchildren into the future, would that be worth it to you? The first Earth Day was April 22nd, 1970. Because money is a poison and trumps logic, mankind has been losing the battle to save our planet for at least half a century. Money has stopped mankind from using our creative imaginations to fix what we have done under the influence of this poison. Imagine what we could do if we were really able to try. The truth is that we have not really tried yet. The poison we are addicted to has stopped us. We have not cleared the desk and started over. This is what we need to do. If we get serious and put our minds together, we will devise ways to reverse the negative effects that this poison has brought upon us. If we follow the road to life, it will not be too late. Clearing the desk means eliminating money. Starting over means developing an all volunteer workforce. These changes put mankind back onto the road to life.